Okay.
Double checks. I'm just going to follow your lead, yeah?
Yeah. Okay, cool. Well, thank you so much for joining me. So for those of you who don't know, I'm sure most of you do, this is Jemima Hughes. And if it's all right, I do at the moment like to ask guests to introduce themselves a little bit, just to tell you a little bit about kind of who you are and what you do. You know yourself more than anyone. So yeah.
So my name is Jemima Hughes. I'm a spoken word poet or a performance poet from Birmingham. I've been doing it for probably about 5 years now. And I started writing poetry because I was going through a really tough time mentally. I was having a really bad mental breakdown. And it just, I got to the point in my breakdown where I'd lost everything. I'd lost my jobs, I'd lost my house, I'd lost my partner. And I'd also kind of lost my voice. I just couldn't speak to people. I didn't want to. I was in a really bad place, but also the things that were in my head and the trauma that I'd suppressed, which was why I was going through this mental breakdown, I didn't know how to speak to people about it. When you've gone that long as well, not speaking to people about it, it's kind of like, how do I suddenly start doing this? So I was not really talking to people at all. I'd moved back in with my parents. I spent most of my time in my room or in my best friend at the time's room as well. Those were like my safe spaces. And all I would do then is put my thoughts down on paper into poetry, in a fashion that was kind of using rhyme and rhythm, and just kind of like, in my head I could hear it. I could always hear it. So when I finally got to the point where I was starting to kind of road to recovery, to put it in a really cliche way, I noticed what spoken word was and realised that what I was doing was actually writing for spoken word. And then eventually, I'm condensing quite a big chunk of time into a really small amount now. But I eventually went to open mic nights and I listened to a couple first. Got up on the stage eventually at maybe the third one that I went to and reeled off 3 poems as quick as I could and then scurried off the stage. But the reaction I got after doing that open mic made me realise how relatable, because the first open mic I did was very mental health based, and how relatable and important that stuff was when people come up to you and go, I really liked your stuff, thank you for sharing that. That really resonated with me. I related to that. And just that little bit of interaction that I hadn't had it for a really long time. I'd never gotten on stage. Like, drama was just my worst subject at school. I was so painfully shy pre-breakdown. And it just kind of swept me up in this little poetry community world that ended up being way bigger than I ever knew. Like, I think until you're part of the poetry community, you don't realise how big it is. There's a lot of it, and I think people hear it without actually realising that it's poetry. Like, it'll be on a bank advert or something, and someone's just listening to an advert, but there's someone doing spoken word in the background of this advert. So yeah, I kind of got swept up in it, and I've been doing it for 5 years, and it went from open micing to headlining to festivals and podcasts and radio shows. And I love it, and I've got my voice back and I can use it.
Nice. Let's use it a bit more. Let's go for it. Well, first things first, if it's okay, we'll start kind of at the beginning. So when you were a child, was there one particular event or one thing that kind of began to shape who you are when you were little? When I was really little, I had such a beautiful childhood. Like, all the way up to the age of 16, I had like the dream, other than not liking school, which I think can be quite a normal thing for a lot of people, and maybe something that I thought was normal, like to not want to go to school anyway, even if I hadn't realised it till later on that maybe it wasn't as normal to not want to go to school that much. But I always found my joy outside of school. I did school because I had to do school. But generally my childhood, my family life with my brothers, I've got 3 older brothers, and we all get along, and my parents are incredible, and it was very idyllic. Like, I didn't have any kind of real issues throughout my childhood. And like I say, until I got to 16, and then that's when it all went completely different. Yeah. So that is the main event, should we say, or the main catalyst for which everything started from. So you, I don't want to say met a man because he was already in your life sort of in the peripherals, but he then suddenly became more prominent.
Yes.
Would you mind telling us a little bit about those initial stages of that relationship?
Yeah, of course. So to just try and make as much sense as possible, when I was about 8 or 9, I started doing trampolining as like an out of school activity. And I started at the high school next to the primary school I was in, and just went along, and it very quickly became the biggest part of my life. I absolutely loved this sport. And I grew up in trampolining then from the age of 8 or 9 all the way up until 17 before I left. And the people there were my second family, without a doubt. We were absolutely family. We travelled the world together, competing in competitions, and as I got older I started coaching, and it was absolutely amazing. And like I say, with my idyllic childhood, it was just part of that. Everything was beautiful. I absolutely loved my life and loved trampolining as a part of my life. And then unfortunately, when I got to the age of 16, there was a coach involved in the sport who I'd always known of and very much had nice positive feelings towards. He wasn't involved with me in my life before that, but anything I knew of him, I just thought he was fun, playful, like quite a nice person. He was funny, like that was one of the things as well. And then he came to our club from a different club, and I think I didn't really know the reasons or anything behind that at the time, but he came into the club to train but also as a coach, and he was older than me. I was 16, he was in his 20s. And it was Christmas 2008, I want to say. I was 16, and I think that's correct. And we had a Christmas party for the staff and the kids, like all of us together, the club. And we just got closer at that party, like we were hanging out at that party. Well, I was very much excited that this older person was giving me attention, and I was also I was a very innocent 16-year-old. Not that any 16-year-old isn't innocent, but in the way of I was still a virgin. I was very much not inclined in that way. I wasn't looking at people in that way. However, I was aware of men and of attention from them, and like that kind of very normal human response of feeling like, oh, this person's giving me
doesn't it?
Really nice attention. So that kind of happened at that party. Nothing more than that really happened. And then after that, it escalated and escalated and escalated, between kind of text messages and then obviously being in the same place, him coaching, us training and stuff like that. And it became what was at the time called a relationship, and what I now refuse to call that, because relationships aren't abusive, so I would call it a situation, but at the time it was a relationship. And it very quickly became controlling, manipulative, scary, abusive. There was rape. At the end it was an attempted kidnap, and that was over the space of 4 months, and it escalated very quickly. Back at the beginning of that relationship or situation, we were told by a higher up coach, this can't be a thing because he is a coach and you are a child, you are under 18. So as far as the law is concerned, obviously a 16-year-old is a consenting age. As far as British gymnastics is concerned, which we were under, you're a child, he's a coach, this isn't actually allowed, so you cannot do this. And I remember thinking at that conversation, thank God, because this is scaring me. But I didn't know how to get out of it. And my coach, our head coach, speaking to us that day and saying, this cannot happen, was such a relief. I remember it so well. We were going to a circus that night, me and this person. And our head coach said, so go to the circus tonight, have fun, but just know this is nothing. This has to stop. This is not allowed. And at that point, I was so relieved, because I was getting so scared of how this person was treating me, and this was early on. Jeez. So afterwards, when the head coach had gone and we spoke, I said, oh, well, I guess that's it then. And he went, no, it's not. Very much point blank, no, it's not. We will not tell anyone, but this is happening. And I was so scared of him. There was no way I was going to do anything other than listen. And I can actually, like, I've never actually spoken about the coach student side of this. So it's actually making me feel emotions that I don't normally feel when like, I've spoken to people in my life about it, but never like at gigs or on radio shows or in podcasts when I talk about why I do what I do. I've never really spoken about the fact that he was a coach and I was a child. I was a student isn't the right word, but I was training, he was coaching, and that part of it under their rules was not allowed, regardless of the fact that he was breaking the law by abusing me. But yeah, he made sure it carried on, and it carried on for 4 months, and it got worse and worse over those 4 months. God. And then on Easter Sunday 2009, I had reached the end of my tether. Like, I was so depressed. The only thing I really wore at that point was a tracksuit that we had the same tracksuits, and they were bought at like a market somewhere. And I hated this tracksuit. But he used to control everything about me, what I wore. He would make sure I didn't go training in shorts just because, or training in trousers when you do trampolining is impossible, because if you want to grab hold of it's so simple, but you want to grab hold of your legs in a move,
right? And
you don't want your hands to slip off.
Yeah.
So I was like, well, I can't train if I can't wear shorts.
No.
But he didn't want me to go out. He didn't want me to see people. He didn't want me to train. He didn't want me to wear certain clothes. He just wanted to be in control of everything I did, even though he could be there whilst I'm doing all this stuff because he's in the same vicinity. But he was definitely fully became in control of everything I did. And I would try and shield anyone else from seeing it because I thought I was in the wrong. And if I explain a part of where that came from, I was raised Christian, so I believed in God. I was never the kind of person who went to church every Sunday or anything like that. But I did believe in no sex before marriage. And I did believe, so when I was to have sex with somebody, I knew that I was going to marry that person. So when he raped me and took my virginity, the first thought in my head, and I still remember it being the first thought, was I have to marry this person now. Because that was how that was ingrained in me.
Yeah.
And that the thought of religion and that's what I wanted wasn't wrong, obviously. But it ended up being worse for me because of that, in the sense that I then was like, wow, this is now what has to happen.
Yeah, it's layers upon something that is just almost unknowable, if that's a word, to a 16-year-old, because you thought it was your fault. And I think if we all think back to, okay, what was I like at 16? I can totally understand why you thought that, because you think this person is older. This person knows more than I do. I'm so flattered this person is paying any attention to little old me.
Yeah, absolutely. And everybody at the club loves him. And he's this great, funny, talented, does moves on the trampoline that I wish I could do, does them in a way that is stunning, wins competition. You know, I was in that world. I looked up to him. Yeah. And he knew that and he used it, definitely. But on Easter Sunday in 2009, I had got to the point where I was like, you've lost everything. I didn't have my family, he detached me. I still lived at home, but he detached me from my family completely. I remember it's in one of my poems that I remember my dad giving me a hug one day and saying, "Don't you love me anymore?" because he just couldn't feel it. There was just no. And I honestly, when he asked me that question, I was so numb, because when you've been going through abuse, you have to be numb. For this person to rape you time and time again, if you feel it, it's worse. At some point, that cut off comes in and you shut yourself down and your body goes into survival. So as well as not feeling the abuse I was going through, I wasn't feeling the love that I had from my family, who never went anywhere. They were still there. But I got to the point on this day, and it was the 12th of April, and I knew I had nothing left to live for if I wasn't to get rid of that situation. Yeah. So I was like, I'm going to use the Easter eggs, the fact that we've got Easter eggs to exchange to get him over to the house. I'm going to sit in the car with him outside, and I'm going to end this tonight. And I knew in my head it has to end. And I've only recently found out that the most dangerous moment for someone going through domestic abuse is the moment they try to leave. And I didn't know that that was true, but it makes sense for my story. So I did, first of all, lighten the mood a little bit. I took the Easter eggs inside. I wasn't missing out on chocolate.
There is chocolate. There's something.
So we swapped Easter eggs. I took the Easter eggs inside. I had chocolate to eat when this all blew up. But then I went back out to the car and we had a conversation. And I was sitting in the passenger seat with my legs outside the door, thought I was safe. The door was open.
Okay.
I had my legs outside the door and we were having a conversation. And I ended it. I can't remember for word what I said.
Yeah.
I said, this isn't right. And we shouldn't be together. And he went silent for over an hour. And I just sat. And I, bearing in mind, I'm outside my parents' house. There is a wall between the house and us. Okay. So, I mean, even if they were stood at the window, then they wouldn't have been able to see us because of the wall. Not that they would have been checking on me every 2 seconds. They know of this person. I said, I'm just going to go out and talk to him and then I'll be back. And I sat in the passenger seat with my feet outside the door and he was in the driver's seat. And I ended it. I can't remember what I said, but I ended it. And he went silent for over an hour, which made my naive, innocent little brain think, I'm actually getting through to him. I can't believe that this is working. And after an hour of just silence and me thinking, he's really trying to process how he's making me feel here, he lashed out and hit my leg, first of all, and then kind of just was getting angrier and angrier. And I just sat there. I thought, I'm safe. I'm at my house. My legs are outside the car. Mm-hmm. If I need to go, I can
go.
And I just waited to see what he wanted to say. I didn't want to disrespect him. I'm still a good person. I don't want to disrespect this person. And eventually he just said no, grabbed the top half of me, leaned over, grabbed my legs and pulled me in, grabbed the door, shut the door and held it shut whilst he started the car and got it to leave my house. And as we drove away, he said, say goodbye to your house because you're never going to see it again. And he drove off up the drive. And he just did not stop. Like, not at any junctions did he stop, not at any ends of roads. He got faster and faster. He must have been going, he went down a dual carriageway at one point and he wasn't going 70 miles an hour. So he must have been going 80, 90 miles an hour. I put my seatbelt on because he was going so fast. Yeah. I needed to be safe. Yeah. And I knew that my phone was in my pocket. And I remember vividly thinking, do not take your phone out of your pocket because he's going to take it off you and you won't have it when you need it.
Yes.
And he just drove absolutely erratically around roads that I know. He didn't go to any roads that I didn't know, but it didn't make it any easier. He was driving around near where I live at first, went the opposite way to what he wanted to go, came back on himself, went up a dual carriageway, and I remember having my hand on the buckle for the seatbelt and thinking, as soon as there's a grassy verge, I'm going to jump out, which now I can look back and go, thank God I didn't, because that was a dual carriageway. He was going over 70 miles an hour.
Yeah.
But in my head, I just need to get out.
Yeah.
I just needed to, I would have jumped out of that car at that speed. That's how terrified I was. And I was trying to talk him down, and he went from the dual carriageway onto the next dual carriageway, which would have then gone onto the motorway. And I thought, let me just try it. I said, you need petrol. Couldn't see his gauge. I've got no idea if he needs petrol, but he always did. He didn't ever have a full tank of petrol. He was the kind of person, who would maybe put £10 in at a time. So it's a good shout. So he's going down this dual carriageway, and I've just said you need petrol, knowing there's a petrol station coming up. And he takes the exit just after the petrol station and went past the petrol station, which made me think, oh, he's ignored me. But then he took the exit and came back around, and I thought, okay, we're going back. So that's good.
Yeah.
Carried on driving erratically, but then came back round to the dual carriageway, and then that time went into the petrol station. So I thought, I have to get out. I'm absolutely terrified, but I have to get out. But I have to wait until he's out the car, because if I look like I'm going to get out, he's getting back in.
Yes.
So he got out the car and I said, can I go and get some water? Because we'd been chatting, I'd been talking to him, trying to talk him down, saying, just go to one of our houses, just go and, you know, like, we don't have to do this, we won't break up, just go to one of our houses, we'll talk about it. And the whole time he was just saying place names, like, shall we go here, shall we go here, shall I go here, like places that were quite far away. And for a 16-year-old who doesn't know those places, very, very scary. So I got to the petrol station, and when he got out I said, can I go and get some water or a drink? Mm-hmm. And he grunted. He didn't answer me, he grunted. So I thought, well, I'm going anyway. It was a question to try and throw him off the fact that I'm getting out for any other reason.
Yeah.
And as he walked round to fill up the car, I got out and tried to look as composed as I could, and I can feel the feelings coming up inside me as I'm thinking and talking about it. And I kind of like the most shaky I've ever been in my life, walked towards the petrol station, and it was like watching a movie. It was like it wasn't me. It was like a blur of just this building and tarmac, and I knew there was people but wasn't really registering it. And then I walked in and there was a queue of people and there was somebody behind the counter, and I just ignored them completely and walked towards the counter. I just knew I had to hide. I just needed to get out. And I just started spilling words. I said, please, somebody help me, blah, 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 like that quickly. Like, it was all words. It was, he's taking me. I don't know where I'm going. Please, somebody help me. I need you to hide me, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
And the woman behind the counter was incredible. She just, come on, straight through. Like, didn't stop me walking, didn't ask me what I was saying, just come through.
Yeah.
Hid me out the back in their, like, food stock room. And I remember there being some sort of, like, pole from floor to ceiling, and I just held onto it and just broke. I was just like trying to hold myself up. I was so scared. And that whole time in the car, which felt like forever, I'd had to keep it together and not seem like I didn't want to be there. I didn't want him to feel like I felt threatened. I'd managed to keep my phone in my pocket and out of his sight. So at that point, I called my head coach. I called my dad. Well, bear in mind, the last my dad knew I was outside his house.
Yeah, yeah.
Absolutely terrified he was. And I tried to explain to him where I was, and him and my brother eventually came, my coach eventually came, but in the time before that, I was told that this person was circling the petrol station trying to find entrances, and at one point someone came in a back door by me, and I was like, I froze, and luckily it was the other man who was working there at the time, and he shut the door behind him, so then someone couldn't get in.
Yeah.
And then obviously this person was then circling looking for ways in. He was getting aggressive to the woman who was hiding me, saying, that's my missus, you need to let me pass. And she said, if that's your missus, why is she so scared? She said, I'm not letting you pass. And she was pushing him back, and he was pushing her, and he was trying to get through.
God for that woman.
Honestly, there are real heroes in this world, and she's mine. Like, she was amazing. Apparently a man in the queue called the police, so eventually they turned up. And yeah, that was where it all ended. The actual thing ended. Yeah. But I mean, a traumatic event like that isn't just one, it follows you then for the rest of your life.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That is it.
Breathe.
And breathe. Oh my God. It's there's just so much to go into from that. I mean, how much did your parents know of your relationship? Did they see signs? Did they ask? Were they frightened for you, or were you just so good at hiding it that they believed you?
I think first of all, not me nor my family had ever seen anything like this before, so we didn't know what we were dealing with. We didn't know people like this. We didn't know abusive relationships. My parents have the most loving relationship, and I don't think my brothers had ever been through anything like this. So it was new. They knew of him, they knew who he was, they knew where I knew him from, they knew that he was a coach and that he trained. They knew that I was interested in him because I didn't hide that.
Fun, charismatic guy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And they knew I spent my time with him, but it literally got to the point where I was protective of him as well, because at first I cared about him, and he came from a place that I cared about, and he was someone I thought I could trust. And by the time I realised he wasn't, I was stuck. And then I wanted to protect my family from what he might do to them because I knew he was dangerous. So it's one of those things where you go, why didn't she just leave? And a lot of people ask that question. And I don't think anyone will ever understand it unless they're in it. You can't, you're trapped. And they did know that things weren't good. My parents, they didn't have any idea how bad it was. They didn't know that he'd raped me multiple times. They know now. It took me a long time to even say that word. And obviously they knew that he'd tried to kidnap me because they saw it all unfold. I was lucky it wasn't any worse, but I'm also glad if it had to end like that, I'm glad that it just ended. So yeah, they knew, and like I said, my dad said that thing about, do you not love me anymore? So they knew that I was going through this, and they tried to tell me not to be with him or that he's a bad person. But if you're in that situation with somebody, you tend to find it pushes away the person. So it pushes me away then, because I'm in that relationship. I'm being protective of him, but he's also my abuser, which is really conflicting.
It's almost Stockholm syndrome-y.
Yeah.
Yeah,
it can be.
Confusing dynamic, to say the least. I mean, it's such a clever tactic, isn't it?
Oh.
The way that he's got you to think, not only you're someone that's so special, I'm the only one that can give you that, lock you in, and then to isolate you from everyone else, so you feel as though this is where I've got to be. I need to protect you as well as... It's horrifically ingenious.
Yeah, and they tell you things. He told me that nobody else loves me. He made it very clear that he was the only one who loved me, and he would lay out reasons why. He told me my dad was an alcoholic. He's not, but he convinced me of that, or tried to convince me of that. And he told me that my brother was a psychopath, because of this and this. They push away all of your circle, everyone around you, and they make you think that you need them. And I've got a line in one of my poems is, the question is, why didn't she just leave? And the answer is, well, I forgot how to be in control, so what would I do if he wasn't? And I couldn't see a life without him, so maybe there wasn't one. They make themselves your whole world. Yeah. So you feel like you won't have a life and that your world will crumble if you get rid of them. And when I tried to break up with him the night that that wasn't the same night. When I tried to break up with him previously and break it off, he would tell me that he would kill himself. So then I don't want that on my hands. I don't want somebody else. I don't want to be responsible for that. And I would just be like, oh, it's fine, we'll stay together. Yeah.
In those days, hours, days and weeks after that came to a head, you got away from him, that amazing woman protected you, everyone realised what had happened. What did you feel?
Relief. I think I just felt the love of my family coming back as well. Like, not that they had ever stopped loving me, but I'd stopped feeling it.
You can open up to it again.
Yeah. And I honestly, I can remember going to a house party for one of my friends at a time when it was still happening. The situation was still happening. And I just felt so numb. I felt completely dead. There was nothing behind my eyes. There was nothing in me. I just had nothing left. And I think all that just slowly started to come back, that I could feel the love from people again and the love that I had for them again. And I think at that age, I just wanted it to go away. I just wanted it to not have happened. Yeah. I felt guilty that it had happened. I felt shame that it had happened. I just wanted to get on with my sport. I loved my sport, but I was losing that because of everything that had happened. And then over the following kind of year or so, especially because there was a court case that then was pushed back a little bit and we had to wait for that to happen, I just got depressed. And I would turn up, I would still try and go training, and I'd just cry at the side of the trampoline. And I remember my coach told my mum, because my mum came to me and told me that the coach said to me today something about how sad you are, how low you are. And my mum said, I think she thought I didn't know. As if she told my mum as if my mum needed to know something, but my mum was like, of course I know, I'll live with her. We know that this is happening.
It's fairly obvious at this point.
Yeah. Yeah. So it was mixed feelings, relief, but also guilt, shame, blame. There was a quite a big aspect as well from the club side of things. Obviously the club didn't want to get in trouble. It shouldn't have got in trouble really, I suppose, because it wasn't any of them. It was one person in particular, and I always think that the blame is always on them. But there was a big aspect of the club not wanting to feel the repercussions of this happening within their club. And so a lot of the blame felt like it was put on me. And bear in mind, I'm 16 going on 17 at that point. That was one of the heaviest weights to hold, especially from people that were family.
Yeah. So you mentioned briefly the court case.
Yes.
So how long after it all came to a head did the court case start to manifest, and what happened with it?
It's really hard to remember exactly. This all happened when I was 16. It ended in April. I would have turned 17 in June, and I was 17 when I went to court, so it was within then that following year.
Yeah.
I know it took a little while to go to court, so maybe about a year. And then it took a little while afterwards as well to get a verdict back. But going to court was traumatising in itself, because the build-up between it happening and coming to a head and then the court case was very much, obviously, he was that night arrested, and then he will have been bailed with conditions to not contact me at all. And as well, I was 16, so I was given as much information as I needed, but no more than that. So I'm quite, if it sounds basic, it's because I was still a child. And he was given conditions not to talk to me, and he ended up messaging me numerous times saying, drop the court case, you better not, I've got the messages still, you better not be speaking to any other guys, mentioning a particular guy he thought I was speaking to, who was a lovely dear friend of mine.
Oh my God.
And just saying, drop this, blah, blah, blah. Well, anyway, I printed off all of this, and I gave it to the police and said he's breaking his bail conditions not to speak to me, because there's a restraining order in place at this point. And it went from magistrates to Crown Court, is what I was told. Was it would have been at magistrates, and because he broke his bail, it went to a Crown Court.
Okay.
I don't know much more than that, really. Nothing else got done. That was it. That was all I heard. And then it went to court whenever it went to court. And I asked for a screen so that I couldn't see him.
Great.
He had his mum with him, which was unusual, because he was more than capable of trying to kidnap someone and abusing someone for 4 months, so I don't know why he needed his mum with him. But he did. And I had to sit alone in there and bawled my eyes out trying to answer their questions. Well, no one can prepare you for court, let alone a 16-year-old. It is brutal the way you're spoken to when they're trying to defend somebody. Yeah. And I don't remember the ins and outs of it. It's a bit of a blur. I just know it was horrible. I left the courtroom at one point because I was crying too much and I just needed a minute. Went back in. I did my best. I remember when I was crying too much and I came out and took a minute, went back in. Someone said to me, someone in the legal system on my side said to me, just say yes or no. Because I'd obviously been saying too much. And they were just like, just say yes or no. Is that right? But the problem is there's not a yes or no answer for some questions. So I remember that was just kind of like just trying to silence you almost. It's like I just want to tell you what actually happened, and you can't really do that in these situations. But also what I should have said was the court case was purely for false imprisonment. It wasn't for rape. At this point I hadn't took him to court for rape. I hadn't told the authorities that had happened. I'd only let what had been seen, because it was unavoidable. This false imprisonment was obvious. They found me at the
there was witnesses.
There's witnesses. Everybody's seen it. The lovely woman who helped me, she was a witness for me in court. The other witness, I believe, I was told, was the police officer on scene. And so it went to court for false imprisonment, which had clearly happened, and whenever the verdict came through, it was not guilty. So the fact that I'd been abused by this man for 4 months and I had far more reason to take him to court, that put me off. That put me off telling anyone about it too much. That put me off absolutely taking it to court. There was just no way. I'm not going to go to court for all of this stuff and then be told I'm a liar.
Yeah.
And that he is not guilty for all of this stuff he's done. So I don't know. I think maybe it was. I don't know. I couldn't have took him to court at that point for the abuse because I wasn't ready to do that. But if I am ever ready, I suppose I can always revisit that. I have different thoughts on that now, which maybe I'll talk about in a little while. My 30-year-old thoughts on that are very different to my 17-year-old thoughts on that. But it's an option if I ever wanted to go down that route. But for a very, very long time, it put me off. And it just made me feel like an idiot. Being told, we don't believe you. Even though people saw this happen, the thing that went to court, people saw it happening. They saw me terrified coming into that garage. I was hid out the back. They saw him circling the place. They saw him trying to get through. They saw him being aggressive.
CCTV.
Yeah.
It's literally on camera.
There's cameras. There's policemen now on scene. There's a woman testifying that she was there and that he was being aggressive and he was trying to get to me. And not guilty.
In what universe?
Mm-hmm. I know. And it's infuriating. But it does put you in a mindset of, well, why then would I be believed on anything else?
Yeah.
And there's a lot more to lose for me going through all of that, because that going through a court case for the false imprisonment was just that one event, talking about that one event, which at the time obviously was far more clearer in my mind, and I just went through it methodically. But going back through 4 months worth of abuse and talking about it clearly enough and pinpointing everything enough for people to go, we believe you, when you have a trauma brain that now tries to protect you and tries to suppress memories, it's terrifying to think you could put yourself in that position and then people will just turn around and go, we don't believe you.
It's like a form of rejection in a way that I personally, and I think probably most other sane people in the world, think that is the most ridiculous thing that I've ever heard. But unfortunately, it is so common, isn't it?
Yeah.
Women aren't believed.
Yeah.
And then, oh, why don't you come forward? Well, why would I put myself in that position, have to relive hellish events, put myself through that, be cross-examined, be torn apart, my character torn apart, and then some arsehole getting off scot-free?
Yeah.
Why on earth would any woman do that? It just makes me so angry that you went through that.
And to bring up all the trauma again, I have really bad PTSD. I have a lot of things that I deal with because of what happened. And for me to relive it would be going back to a place that I have kind of worked through already. And I would be putting myself in a position where potentially I could get more unwell, I could have worse PTSD, could get worse dissociative episodes, all these things. I could get really depressed again, which at the moment I'm not living with, which is amazing.
Great.
I could get far more anxious, which I deal with on a manageable level now, whereas at one point it was unmanageable. I also would worry that it would put my family at risk because he knows them, he knows who they are, he knows where they are, and there's all these questions. It's not as simple as being like, well, he did wrong, so go and tell someone he did wrong.
No.
Because you there's so much more to it than that. It's not just telling your teacher at school that someone's just pushed you over. This is so different to that. And people being believed for this kind of stuff. And I do understand it. Even though I've been on the receiving end of the abuse, I understand that a false claim against somebody for abuse is a terrifying, detrimental, life-destroying scenario.
Yeah.
But as a victim of abuse who potentially wouldn't be believed for what I've been through, that's not my problem. My problem is I have to live with this for the rest of my life. He gets to move on and carry on and do all his life and carry on actually doing the things that I would love to do, because I had to quit coaching and he carried on. So it's very, very much the wrong way around.
Yeah.
And I'm the one who has to live with the blame and the shame and work through all of the guilt and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
And my family has to rebuild, and he just carries on, and his family carry on.
There's a systemic problem in society with the fact that we should be putting up things that make it easier for us to come forward with these things, not make it harder. And of course, I mean, if someone is falsely accused of something, how awful.
Oh,
but also,
absolutely.
It's just so statistically unusual. It's not that it doesn't happen, but we shouldn't then use that small statistic and then be like, oh, well, you know, there's a chance that she's lying. There's a chance that, you know, she's exaggerating, whatever.
Yeah.
We don't want to ruin this young man's life. You know, let's, you know, just give him a slap on the wrist or something, when you're the one that has to then carry this burden for the rest of your life. It's backwards. We should be creating systems to make it easier for you to be able to be in that situation, to tell your truth, to get justice in that way, and not feel as though you're going to be torn down. As a 16-year-old, you're going to be not believed, and it's all there in a court transcript, and you don't want that to be on record, that you're somehow a liar, that you're somehow...
Well, this is it. That could be so detrimental then to me.
Yeah.
If I tried to go through all of the court proceedings again for the abuse side of things, and it was to come back not guilty, then on a personal level, I'm going to be rock bottom again, but also on a societal level, if it's something other people know about, I'm going to have the worry of how it makes me look now as somebody who has seemingly just accused someone who isn't guilty. So, yeah, there's a lot more to it than just someone did right, someone did wrong, someone else is in the right, and it can be dealt with in that way. There's so much more to it.
So after all of this has happened, going through the court case, going through the relationship, bloody situation, I don't even want to call it that either, the abusive period, how did you feel about him, and how do you feel now?
So I think my view has changed massively over the years, and I think it's probably a lot to do with just getting older and learning more about the world and having a more open mind. I think my breakdown massively helped with that, because my mind opened up so much more. Prior to my breakdown, for example, I would have just been like, why can't people smile and be happy? I don't get it. Like, someone would, maybe I used to work in retail after all the sport ended, and if someone came in and spoke to me in a certain way, I'd be like, why do they have to give me their bad day, kind of thing. Whereas now I look at it after having my breakdown and I'm like, they've obviously got something going on, and it's not on me, it's not my responsibility, and I hope they're okay.
Yeah.
So it's maybe just growing and maturity. But I heard once from somebody on Netflix that we shouldn't refer to our abusers as monsters, because that makes them sound like they're really big and scary, and they are the smallest people on this earth. And that really rang true with me. And that made me stop thinking of him, or try to work on not thinking of him as this scary monster. And I think it actually worked towards me thinking of him actually more as a human being who, he obviously did something very wrong. He did multiple things with regards to me very wrong, and I learned of things that he did wrong prior to me afterwards, when it was too late to know that that's what he was like before. But I do also hold the view now, which I know we've spoken on before, of if he is leading a life where he's not harming other people now, and he's not a rapist, and he's not abusing people, and he's grown and he's matured, because he was in his earlier 20s then. So if he's now in his 30s and he's living a not harmful to other people life, I would rather him carry on doing that than be put in prison, be in four walls, and deteriorate into someone who can't function within society, because I don't think prison is good for anybody in that way. People need to be rehabilitated when they've committed crimes, and we don't really have that system here in this country.
Yeah.
And I don't think many countries have it right, to be honest. I understand it would take a lot of resources. It's a massive conversation. But if he is living a life where he's not doing these things to other people and not affecting people in a criminal and in a terrible and abusive way, I'm fine with him carrying on regardless of what he's done to me. I have to live with this regardless of where he is. The fact that he's in the same world as me is enough. I have to live with this. But if he's not doing it to anybody else now, then I'd be more than comfortable with him carrying on as he is, which also is another question going back to taking him to court now, would be, is it a good idea? Because there is a chance that they do believe me, that I get a guilty verdict, and then he gets punished through the prison system, which is not conducive to rehabilitating people who have done wrong.
Right.
He could get worse. He might be in there for like that in-between amount of time where he's still out in enough time to then possibly re-offend, because it's made him worse just going crazy inside four walls. So I have a very open-minded view on him just carrying on how he is. I just would like to know whether he's doing it without harming people, which is not something that I can know.
It's like almost an interesting exercise to go, what has to be broken in someone for them to do that to another human being? Because that's not something that somebody who's happy and has their emotions sorted. That's to isolate you from everybody else. I mean, perhaps he doesn't feel like he's enough, and it's the only way he can get someone to be there. Like you could go on for hours with guessing what might be going through his mind, but thinking of him as a human and flawed is such an incredible thing that I think that you do.
Oh, thank you.
I mean,
I try to think of it, there may be no excuse for someone's actions, and there truly is no excuse for the way he behaved.
Yeah.
But there's always a reason. I don't know what that reason is. I can speculate that for me, I feel like he was uneducated. I feel like there needs to be more education through schools, through college, through unis, on what consent is and what is acceptable and what is unacceptable, which is what I tried to do through the poetry. I think it was an uneducated aspect. I think it was a he gets away with everything aspect. I don't really know. I'm making excuses for him now. I just said there's no excuses, but there's always reasons. It's just whether we know what they are. And then it's kind of how do you make things right now because without knowing whether he's doing wrong now. And that would mean diving into his life, which would be terrifying for me as somebody who's been abused by him. So it's just not straightforward.
It's a delicate balance because you almost want to make sure that he is not doing that to anybody else. But also, like you say, getting close to him isn't non-consequential for you. It is gravity shifting. I can only imagine even getting close to someone who's done you that much damage, who's created such changes in your life. Like that's not a small thing to do, and it shouldn't be your responsibility either. It's the system, I suppose.
Exactly.
Again, coming back to that, it would be an interesting decision either way with what you decide in the future, whether you decide to take anything forward or whether you decide that is, not the right thing for you because of whatever reason, some of which we've touched on today. It's more complex than people going, well, why don't you just, because...
completely. There's so much more to it.
Yeah.
And I think that's why I'm doing what I'm doing with the poetry and with things like this where I speak about it. This is me trying to make some sort of positive difference out of it whilst not really knowing how else to do it.
Yeah.
I can't take him off the street and make him not a threat like this. But what I can do is maybe educate people on, first of all, what is consent, what isn't, what's acceptable, what isn't, but then also on how we can make the world a more comfortable place to live for people who are dealing with this trauma.
Yeah.
Because life is never the same again after stuff like that.
Can I ask, we've touched upon this very briefly in the interview before, but in terms of your relationships now with older men and with other people in your life, how have they been affected?
Well, as far as, men as I don't naturally just think bad of all men at all. Like, I've got 3 older brothers and a dad who are great men.
Yeah.
But as far as being close to men, it makes it really hard to have those special intimate relationships with people. And I'm not just talking about a partner, but, you know, like hugging your older brothers, hugging your dad, it makes that really difficult because the person who abused me was in a trusted, authoritative position. And so any male in a trusted position of authority within my life, it makes me flash back to that, and it makes me uncomfortable. And it's not a conscious decision to be uncomfortable. I subconsciously go to being uncomfortable, and then it makes it really difficult to be, even in conversation with people sometimes. I've grown over the last 5 years or so through a lot of therapy and help. But I started off not even being able to have conversations with my parents. I couldn't even speak to them for 2 minutes without just getting completely uncomfortable. My skin would be crawling. I'd be angry. I'd just need to go because otherwise I was going to blow in front of people, and I never wanted to do that. So then I'd go to my room all the time, and I stayed in there. So much of my time was spent in my room because I just didn't want to react around other people because nobody knew me as that person. I was such a shy, kind, gentle person as I was growing up. I would never have reacted or behaved like that around people, and it completely changed when it hit me and my mental breakdown started. It completely changed how I was around people, and I could barely even hold a conversation. I used to sit on the stairs to talk to my family because there was the bars in between, and it felt like a bit of a barrier. So I'd be like, well, they can't hug me, they can't touch me. It's sad, but it was a coping mechanism I had to use. To if it meant having a conversation because I was sat behind the bars of the stairs, then that was step one. Let's do that first. I can say now I'm at a point through a lot of hard work. I'm at a point now where I can go into my house and I can hug my parents. I can sit down and have a normal conversation with them, have a cup of tea and a chat and sit and watch telly with them. I do still get to a point with anyone where I will go, I need to retreat now. I think it's obviously very human to feel that way anyway. So I try and not be hard on myself for the things that actually everybody feels that way. But I know that there's still an element of just PTSD and trauma stuff where there's a discomfort that comes. And I also have involuntary twitches and tics sometimes if I'm really uncomfortable, or sometimes really excited. I just can't. Sometimes my body can't distinguish between the negative and the positive.
It's like a nervous system thing almost. It's sort of just something's happening inside, so it's sort of a bit twitchy.
Comes out. I don't actually normally tick or twitch too much at home because that is my safe space, and my room at home at my parents' house is my safe space. But then it actually tends to be more in like a romantic setting. So like with a partner, that will be more where my tics and my twitches come out, because that was where I was abused, was in a relationship. So ever since that, because that was my first ever relationship when that happened, every single relationship since then, as soon as that label relationship goes on, I've always felt trapped, and it suffocates me straight away. And I'm honestly so grateful that I'm in a new relationship now that I've been in only since the end of last year, October last year. And it was the first time ever since 16 years old where once that relationship title went on, nothing physical changed. I just felt we just went so gradually and naturally from friends, because we'd been friends for going on half a year to a year kind of time. And it just went, nothing changed. It stayed on a level and it just went into a relationship. And that felt like progress, because I'd obviously worked with that through therapy and stuff, like spoken about it. So that was one of the things where being in a relationship always felt trapped, because my first experience of relationship was you are trapped when you're in a relationship, and that stays with you even if you don't mean for it to. It just does. And you have to work through those things. And now I'm in a place where I don't feel that way. I still tick and I still twitch and I come out with all sorts of things, but I'm with someone who goes, that was cute, rather than being like, what did you just do? So it's easier now.
Someone who can understand through listening to you, through empathy, through sympathy, and want to be there in a way that is what you need as well. Not like, you know, tapping their feet, trying to be patient with it. It's giving you the space that you actually need to heal. Because the thing about healing from anything is that it takes so long. There's so much to delve into, especially if you were actively suppressing things because it was just too painful at the time. Like, I think for a lot of people as well, if they're in like a new relationship or if they can't find a relationship, it's a lot for the new person as well. And if you aren't prepared to give you the time of day that you need, and not even just the time of day, consistently, and work through that complicated period, he sounds amazing.
He is. I must admit, you make so much sense there, and it resonates so much because I've been through relationships where it is difficult for the other person, and I completely understand that. I've always gone into relationships being like, I've got to be open with you about this, especially since my breakdown. It didn't really happen until it all hit me and I had my breakdown. Before that, I was still suppressing, and there was signs of the trauma, and I was struggling, and like sexual intimacy was really difficult in its own way. But once the breakdown happened and I allowed it all to hit me, it got way worse before it got better. And I've been through relationships where I've been honest with them, and they've heard the poetry, for example, and I've been like, look, it's not easy. There's this stuff that happens, like I dissociate and I twitch. I'll be in Sainsbury's and I'll start twitching, or I'll dissociate and I won't remember something that's happened. I have voices in my head. They have names. It's just my defense mechanism that my body set up because I went through something at a young age. There's a very logical explanation for things like this, which people don't necessarily understand straight away. But the way it was explained to me in therapy was, I went through this traumatic experience at a time when I was still very creative in mind because I was still quite young, and my mind created these different aspects to deal with traumatic situations. So now if at any point I feel threatened, I don't necessarily remember stuff because it's basically like switching off. It's like going on to autopilot. But for me, I have different identities. And it sounds so terrifying when people think of it in that way. It's just a very creative defense mechanism to keep you safe. That's all it is. It's like when you are driving along and then you get somewhere and you're like, I don't really remember that journey that I just did because you're kind of zoned out, but you got here safely. It's that kind of thing where I can't really remember doing that because I was dissociating. But I've been through relationships where I've explained all this, and it has still multiple times got to the point where they're like, I can't do it. It's too much. I can't do it. Because the flashbacks as well, they can be horrific to the point where I'm screaming, I'm thrashing, I don't know it's happening, I do know it's happening, I'm crying my eyes out. They're in the middle of sex because that's obviously where a lot of my trauma stems from. And it's understandable that some people can't or don't know how to deal with that. And it's learning to deal with that together when you're in a relationship, and you've got to be in a place where you can. Like, it's true that you have to check in with yourself before you check in with someone else. Obviously, in a relationship, if they're not feeling in a headspace to support you, it's trying not to be judgmental of that as well, and just acknowledge that, well, then we can't really be together because this is my reality. But I have had people say to me, it's too much, like I can't cope. And I'm like, I know, I have to live with it. I know it's too much. And yet there's no way you can warn someone enough until they see it all happening.
In theory, it's like, of course, I'll stay with you through whatever. But in actuality, when that is a day-to-day reality over and over again, over a period of weeks, months, years, forever, it's damn hard.
And that's the thing. And then I always feel like the more I try to be well and be better, horrible word, for somebody else, the worse it gets. Because then I'm not accepting who I am and how I am.
You're masking.
And then it gets worse and worse, and then I'm trying to mask it more, and it's just getting worse, and then the relationship starts going like this because neither of us are coping. Whereas now I'm in a relationship where he's accepting of absolutely everything and just takes it in his stride. We talk about it openly. It means I can accept myself how I am right now, and there's no pressure on me to be a certain way, and everything just gradually gets better, just like a little bit at a time when you've got that acceptance around you.
it's an important thing, I think, to remember and see another person's limits of what they're able to take, and like you say, not be judgmental for it, and know that it's a lot, and also know that you aren't too much.
Yeah.
You know, because there's this thing of like, I'm too much, and you try and censor it and make it socially acceptable as well for other people, other situations, and women especially, and you know, female identifying people are so good at that. We're so good at that. Like, why do you think that women aren't, you know, diagnosed with autism as much as males? It's because we're so damn good at masking. But I suppose there comes a time when, especially in an intimate relationship, that wall has to come down.
Yeah.
And if it can't come down, it's not right.
Yeah. I think I've learned over the years as well, since my breakdown, that I'm better off just being as open and honest as I can be right from the get-go. Because if you're friends with me for long enough, it's going to creep in, let alone if you're in a relationship with me.
Yeah.
And I wrote a poem recently which was the opposite end of the spectrum to what I normally write. So I normally write about my negative sexual experiences to try and raise awareness about what isn't acceptable and how we don't behave and how bad it is to go through. But I wrote a poem recently about my partner. We weren't together when I wrote it. It was just before we got together.
Yeah.
And it's called "Every Woman Who's Ever Been Abused Should Get to Spend the Night with You, open brackets, to clarify, I don't want them to, close brackets." Because it just felt right for what I was saying. It was kind of like, this is how it should be, and every woman who's been through this abuse should feel this. They should feel this acceptance of everything. Like, we'll be intimate, and if I leave the room effectively because I'm having the worst flashback ever, it looks to him like I'm going through abuse again. I know it's that bad. I can't imagine from his perspective how horrible that is to look at, but for somebody to stick with you through that, for you to come out the other side of it and him just be like, it's nice to have you back. Oh, it's like,
you're worth sticking around for.
Yeah. And someone who does that time and time and time again and reassures you it's not wearing on them. Like, all of these things. So I put all this into a poem of kind of like all the things that he does that people should do for a person who's been through these traumatic experiences if they're going to be in a relationship with them. Like, these are the things that we should be doing for each other and that we should be accommodating, because we have to try and make it easier to live with these experiences. The experience cannot be taken away. We can only deal with what we're dealing with now. Yeah. So yeah, just letting somebody know that you're hugging them for them and not for yourself is just, it's such a big thing. For me, it was a friend of mine who said it to me a few years ago. I said, it's weird because I'm comfortable hugging you, but like, I don't like contact with people. He said, it's because I hug you for you. And I was like, oh my God, it's exactly what it is. You hug me because you know I need a hug. You don't hug me because you want to touch me. Right. It's huge to do that for somebody. To actually know that what they need right now is not you to need to touch them. It's for them to feel like you're hugging them for the comfort that you're providing to them, not for what you're getting out of it. Yeah. It's exactly what it is, especially when you've been through a life of men just getting gratification from your body.
Absolutely. Yeah. And the confusion as well, that's in the contract. Yeah. It's like, this is one of the things, I think I might do a post about it because I'm really riled up about it. Like, I'm going to be like, just because you are in a relationship with someone, you don't owe them sex. Yes. Sex is something which is shared amongst you. That is a fantastic thing to do and a way to be intimate and share and explore your relationship and deepen your connection. Yeah. It is not something that I've signed, cool, I'll be your girlfriend, so we'll do Tuesdays, Thursdays and Sundays, shall we? Yeah. And it's that you do not have the right to be like, if I say no at all. Yeah. It may be inconvenient, and if you don't like it and you can't deal with the fact that your partner doesn't owe you sex, perhaps you're not mature enough to be in that relationship yet. Perhaps you need to learn this lesson. But I do see it a lot with men. It's this thing of I'm entitled to it, from when it's not a right, it's a privilege.
Yeah. It's like an expectation, and I feel like society doesn't help that, or hasn't over the years, and maybe we're going the right direction now of being like, because people do talk about consent more now, and about how being in a I've got a poem called Consent, and about the fact that being in a relationship is not approval. Whereas I think, especially when I was 16, that was not the vibe. No. The vibe was very much, if you're in a relationship, there are expectations of you to be intimate, to be kissing very quickly, to be moving on from that very quickly. And God, you're supposed to know what to do when it's your first relationship and it's your first intimate moment, and if you feel like the pressure is on you to do that, it's so wrong. That's not what society should be doing to people, and to women, to girls. Yeah,
because that's exactly what they are. They're children. When we're starting to get into these things and like kissing for the first time and perhaps doing more, it's just like you feel an immense pressure because you don't want to be called frigid.
Yeah.
And you don't want to lose the person who's interested in you, because a little part of you thinks they may only be interested in me because they think there's a chance of that. And at that point in time, my self-esteem as a young girl is usually, or for me particularly, and for a lot of young women, is so low, my self-esteem, that I think, oh, okay, well, I've got to do something to keep him around and keep him interested.
Yeah.
It's awful.
Well, I know for me, a side effect, which I didn't learn until going through therapy, a side effect of going through the sexual violence trauma I went through was seeking validation in sex. And so I didn't realise this was a side effect, but it's absolutely a very known one, which I had to learn.
Yeah.
And it makes so much sense, because I absolutely went through that phase post or during and then post breakdown of seeking that kind of approval and validation through the thing that I was taught was most important at the age of 16. Of course, it's so obvious when you put it like that, but when you don't know that to be a thing, it's kind of, you hear it and you go, oh my God, that explains why I feel like I do.
Right.
I've been taught that I owe men my body, that's all my body is for.
Yeah.
I mean, going off topic a little bit, but still on topic, I had a driving instructor at the age of 17, so this is like a year after the abuse, and bearing in mind now I'm just living by the fact that this is what relationships, this is what men are like, this is what relationships are like. And I had this driving instructor, probably in his 40s, and he was so inappropriate with me. And he told me to wear a tight top and a short skirt when I did my test and I would pass.
Oh my God.
He said, he asked me what a kind of corner this corner was, because I was about to reverse around the corner.
Yeah.
I said, oh, it's a tight corner. And he said, stop saying the word tight, like it was like he was flirting with me. And then I have a driveway at my parents' house where I live, and I was driving back home, and he was obviously in the passenger seat, and I said, where do you want me to park it? And he said, anywhere where no one can see us. And that day, I got out the car and I went into the house and I said, Dad, the driving instructor's just said this to me. And he phoned up straight away and he said, my daughter will not be doing lessons with you again, and you know why, and hung up the phone. So that was another experience of just men taking whatever they want from me in a physical way, in a sexual way. And it just ingrains into you at the first experiences, sexual experiences of your life, are all these negative, abusive, rape experiences. And it ingrains into you that this is what you're good for, this is where you find approval, this is what will validate you.
Yeah.
So then when that comes back around in your adult life, it takes a minute to see it, but when someone says it to you, it's like, oh yeah, and oh yeah, that of course that would happen, because this is what I was taught. When I was a sponge, that's what I absorbed.
Yes.
And now I'm a bloody wrung out cloth. It's a bit different now.
We're continually just going, oh yeah, need to get rid of that, need to get rid of that. Like,
exactly.
It was the entire culture that we were surrounded with when we were growing up, which is the way that young males maybe talk to you, and just the vibe, just the intention. Because as young people, we know what people want from us. We know what they think that we're good for. And if it's a young male talking to you in a certain, way, even if they're like, oh, I just want to be your friend, you know that they're not just after friendship. You know that they don't speak to their friends in that way, and yet you're expected to play the game, to be coy, to be like, oh, you know, oh, of course, it's just friends. You've said it's just friends. And as soon as you suggest it's anything else, they'll be like, oh, don't be paranoid, you're ugly anyway.
Yeah, exactly. Oh, God, you just like hit my teenage years on the head,
right?
But also I was in a petrol station not long ago, like I did a gig maybe last month, and I was just going to get petrol before I went off, and I walked into this petrol station and a man walked in at the same time as me, and there was two men behind the counter, one that looked like he was in his late 30s and another older guy maybe in his 60s, and then there's this man in the shop with me, and me and this man are both looking at the food and the snack stuff because I want some stuff for the road. And the younger guy behind the counter, he pipes up and he goes, all right, princess. And I thought, well, he isn't talking to the man who's in the shop, is he? So I knew he was talking to me, and I ignored him. And he said, what are you looking for? Do you need some snacks for the road? Do you want any help for what you're looking for? And I just said no. And what I wanted to say was far more, but I was, do you know when sometimes you're not in the mood to educate someone?
Shut up, the bloody energy.
And I just had no energy. I was like, I need to preserve my energy for a gig I'm about to do. So I just said no, carried on. And as I walked past the other man who was looking in the store, I went, fucking princess, who does he think he's talking? Like, just like under my breath, but also I hope you hear it. And he laughed because he was just like he seemed like a nice guy. I don't know, I didn't have a chat with him, but he seemed to get it. He was a bit like... And then when I went up to the counter, the guy just carried on talking to me, and he was just like, oh, is it that car over there, the Lamborghini, like trying to make a joke. And what I should have said, and what I wanted to say was, sorry, are you talking to me or the other princess in the shop? Will you call him princess? Will you ask him if he would like some help? Why are you only asking me if I want help? We are doing exactly the same thing right now. We're both in here looking at your shelves. We're both about to pay you for petrol. Why am I the princess and why am I the one who needs help? Because I'm fine without you. I don't need you.
Yeah.
But it's just this mentality in some men that we just need them. And we need their attention to be anything. I'm fine without you, thank you. In fact, I'd have been better off without most men. So,
you actually made my sandwich picking harder today.
And don't get me wrong, if a man approaches me in a respectful way and wants to have a conversation, I will have that conversation.
Of course.
If that man had waited until I came to the counter and then said, oh, is it the Lamborghini at number 5? I'd have thought that's quite funny, actually.
You would have done a fake laugh and carried on with your day.
I'd have a fake laugh all day for him. I'd have thought that's quite nice. He tried to make conversation cute. But if you're going to shout at me over a shop where other men are present trying to look like the big guy and there's another man who you could have asked if he wanted help, you're making me look stupid, you're making yourself look stupid, but you're trying to make yourself look good, and I don't appreciate it. Oh, rant over.
Oh my God, no, totally. It's such a thing, isn't it? It's like when we're either can't be bothered, and honestly, why should we be bothered? Like, we've only a certain amount of energy in the day, and I'm not going to spend it educating you, because honestly, that's the only issue in this situation. You are uneducated.
Yeah.
You think that I'm somehow confused reading the word like prawn cocktail, that I need your help, like, and you know that, but you need me to need you.
Yes.
If you don't, like, if you were secure in yourself as a person, as a man, you wouldn't need somebody subservient to feel superior to.
Yeah. And wouldn't it have been different if my partner was with me that day?
Oh.
Which infuriates me, because why is I have a boyfriend more effective than no, or stop, or please don't, or just being educated that it's not right to disrespect somebody in that way? Why is a man walking in something you respect more than a woman walking in on her own?
My no should be enough.
Yeah.
Yeah, so much of the time
My
it's not
silence
enough.
should be enough.
Yeah.
If I'm saying nothing, shut the fuck up.
Yeah, honestly, my silence is your sign. Please read it.
Honestly.
Jesus.
And it's frustrating then, because you do get well-meaning, good-meaning people who you then end up not having the time of day for, which I try not to do, but sometimes you just get sick of the shit.
You walk into a situation suspicious, don't you? Anyway.
Yeah.
And I do feel bad if someone's like, you know, actually trying to speak to me, and then I'll realise, oh, maybe you're not such a tool.
Yeah.
And then I'll start to give them the time of day, because of course I want to, you know, speak to you. You seem like a nice person. Maybe we've got something in common. You know, if I wasn't in a relationship, and, you know, if someone approached me, because that's what I don't like, is when people are like, I'm so afraid to actually approach women. And it's like, please do, but please know exactly what you're doing and do it in the right way.
Yes.
If you approach with I really like to get to know this human being, not, oh, she seems fit, I'll go up to this chick kind of thing. Like, go up to me, treat me like a human being, and have a respectful intention. I will give you the time of day if that's what...
If I have the time.
If I have the time and if I'm interested.
Yeah.
But if you come up with an agenda and you come up with all this bravado, my mind closes, because you just see right through it.
Well, it's funny as well. It is about being respectful, and it's also, I think, about the right place at the right time. So you posted an Instagram video a little while ago, and it prompted me to post one myself, and I never got round to filming it, because when you have to be in the right headspace to talk about all this heavy stuff.
Right.
So I'm going to share it with you now.
Yeah.
So you spoke about an experience that you'd had that you just kind of were like, can anyone relate to this? With, like, I'm sure it was an experience with a male, and it had just made you think a certain way of kind of like, there've got to be other people who have gone through this.
Yeah.
Well, I came out of work, and I was just walking back to my car, so the route is familiar to me. And I was in a dark alleyway. Lovely, but I know this alleyway. I know where I'm going. I'm not in it for long. I'm never afraid of this route. And as I was walking down this alleyway, a man was walking towards me, and I thought he was going to go past me, and then he decided to stop me. And he said, oh, can I just talk to you for a minute?
Okay.
And I was like, yeah, what do you want to talk to me about? It's freezing, it's winter, it's freezing. And there happens to now be nobody around us in this dark alleyway, which I hadn't really noticed straight away. So I just said, oh yeah, like, how can I help? Very, very friendly, as much as I could be. And honestly, this is why I couldn't record this video, because I don't know what he said really after that. He went round and round in circles about the fact that he wanted to talk to me about something, but he didn't get to his point. I don't know if he had one. And he just kept going round and round in circles. He said a little bit about how, oh, no one will just stop to talk these days. And I said, oh, I understand, but I have got to get home and it's bloody freezing. So if you could get to why you stopped me, that would be great. And he just carried on talking round and round in circles, did not get to a point. I still to this day have no idea why he stopped me or what he was talking about. And after a little while, he got a little bit closer to me. He had his hands in his pockets. And it was only after like a minute of just round and round. And when you're in a conversation with someone you don't know, a minute is quite a long time.
Yeah.
And he was just going round and round and round, and I was like, this is going nowhere. And you're in a dark alleyway, and he's got his hands in his pockets, and he's really close to you, and you don't know him. And all these things just started coming up in my head, and I was like, I'm an idiot. Why have I stopped? Why am I giving this person the time of day? And I said, I'm really sorry, I'm going to have to go. And he went, and then he started to get frustrated, and he was like, this is why no one ever stops to talk, and blah, blah. And if I thought for a second this person needed my help, or that he needed some money, that he needed somewhere to be, somewhere to go, he didn't say that to me. He didn't ask for anything from me. He didn't look like he needed anything from me. He didn't make that clear to me. He was just going around and round in a conversation without telling me. He told me he had a reason for stopping me, but didn't get to why. And I was just like, I feel threatened now, because I don't understand this, and it's dark, and I'm in an alley, and I don't know who you are, and your hands are in your pockets. And so I said, I'm going to have to go. He tried to kick off at me, and I said, look, can you understand my position that you've just put me in? I'm in a dark alley at night with a man I don't know. And he went, I'm in the same position. I don't know who you are. I went, you stopped me.
What?
You're now trying to tell me you feel threatened, but you asked to speak to me. I didn't ask to speak to you. It was so odd. I tried to make the video to talk about it, to say, like, this is not how you approach women, but I couldn't even do it because I didn't know what he was talking about, so I didn't know what to say. I was like, this is just too odd to even put into words. But that's exactly what we were saying about just be respectful, but also be mindful of how you're approaching somebody.
Yes.
Because approaching them in the dark in an alleyway with no one else around with your hands in your pockets and not telling them what you're going to talk to them about is probably not the way to do it. Don't know what he wanted. I have no idea.
Especially, like, just expect, if you're a woman, if you are in a vulnerable position, or if you're, physically weaker than perhaps the person who's approaching you, it is not my problem how you feel. Yeah. It's my problem to keep me safe. And if you're doing anything dodgy, even if you don't even think of it, and I'm sure he didn't, I'm sure it was the man in the car park video, I'm sure he literally just wanted to know about the parking situation, but as soon as I saw him come towards me, I was like, gut is telling me this is dangerous.
Yeah.
Get in the car, lock it. And then when they have no idea, they have no idea
I think
why
that's
you're
what
upset.
it is. It's like, why do you feel threatened by me? And it's that obliviousness to what situations I may have encountered in the past, how I've been treated in the past, how you look approaching me right now, the fact that I don't know you, the scenario we're in.
Imagine being completely at someone else's mercy just because of the difference in physical strength.
Exactly.
That is the situation we're in. And if you were in that situation, if you were, in the same alleyway with like John Cena, like that is the situation that we're talking about.
Yeah.
If you feel vulnerable in that way and you thought, this person is acting in a way that is suspicious, I might get beaten up, I might get sexually abused, I might get whatever goes through your mind, you're going to exit in a rude way.
Yeah.
And I will never apologize for that. That is what we should do. That is what people in that position should do. Keep yourself safe.
And I think I exited in a rude way, and I fully did. But it was because I thought, do you know what? I feel so threatened now. I feel like I need to leave in a way that makes me not look threatened. So I left in a complete frustrated huff, and I kind of like puffed up my chest and left because I was like, I'm not leaving like this. I'm not leaving like, oh, he's just scared me. So until I'd got the other side of the wall where I knew I was going, I could see my car and blah, blah, blah. I was just like, I'm going to go now. And I did it loudly and I did it proudly and I did it with confidence. And then as soon as I got the other side of the wall, I was like, oh my God.
Oh my God.
And it is just a case of look at the situation. Does it look like that they want to be approached? Does it look safe to approach them? Will they feel safe being approached?
Yeah.
Is what I'm about to say respectful? Just think first.
Definitely. Take a step back from that situation. Think, okay, is it day or is it night? It's night. Okay, that's a bad one for the bad list.
Yeah.
Are we alone? Yes, we're alone. Okay, this is going to be more scary for them.
Yeah.
And just other factors, you cannot expect someone to be reasonable.
Yeah.
You cannot expect someone to give you anything, the time of day, or even come within a few meters of you if those things are ticked. It's literally as simple as that. It's a tick list.
Yeah.
If the situation is deemed as dangerous in any way, you cannot expect that of another person. Yeah. I love this.
Yeah. I would set the scene, but my body's defence mechanisms have almost wiped that clean. I couldn't tell you where we'd been, only that I was 16 and what ensued was unforeseen, at least to me, but he was a well-oiled machine. It's dark. Exhaust fumes burn the air and the car is in park. I'm unaware he's about to leave his first mark. The warning lights weren't on. How was I meant to know there was about to be a problem, let alone a big one? To me, the fact a guy showed any interest was a phenomenon. He didn't care about me. How I took my tea, that my least favourite soup was minestrone, whether I enjoyed swimming in the sea or any information about my family tree. He didn't care what I wanted to be, that I had aspirations and dreams, or even how my day at school had been. He only cared what he could get for free as he fumbled around with the buttons on his jeans. It wasn't locked. I could have got out and ran or let out a shout, but I sat and barely entertained my doubt because it was too early to cause a fallout. It didn't matter if to my religion I was devout because he knew it wasn't within my character to act out and that it wasn't something that I was going to talk about, maybe. Why I didn't move was because who would do anything that bad? Outside the house containing my mum and dad. 3 older brothers with every reason to get mad. If only my thoughts had clocked the ones he had. But to have attention from an older lad until this moment had made me glad. The one whose name I doodled in hearts in my yellow sketch pad. And now, you're not leaving until I'm finished, he said, as he gripped his left hand around the back of my head and forced it down to give him his. I wanted to be magically in my bed, alone. Maybe it was my actions he had misread. Or maybe I was a young girl that he had misled. Now the warning lights were burning my eyelids in blood red. This was nothing like the romance stories as a child I'd been read. It wouldn't have mattered how carefully I'd tread because he'd already planned this out in his head. I should have bit it there and then. Taken one for the team for any future girls or women. But my whole teenage body felt weak. There was no room for me to speak. Maybe words would have invited unwelcome critique. Already convinced I was some sort of freak, the last thing I needed were comments on technique. Or the opposite, some bullshit about how I was special or unique. The silence I'd believed to be a part of his mystique was masking a mentality petrifyingly bleak, so I convinced myself this is what women deserve and what all men seek as he thrusted bruises onto the insides of my cheeks. You're not leaving until I'm finished, he repeats. I didn't care that I couldn't breathe. By now, passing out would have been a relief to put a halt on my childhood being taken by a thief to delay the onset of the inevitable grief. The burning exhaust fumes imitate my burning desire to be anywhere else but here. I choke on my fear as my mind kicks in to interfere with thoughts of how I'll finish this academic year with a future that's about to become very unclear. I swallow my shame, the taste of blame drains the colour from my face. No signs of an embrace, only a hurried exit just in case anyone caught me in all my disgrace. Clutching the cross on my neck, I hurried to the place I call home. Game face as I steadied my tone. Mum? Dad? I'm home. I'm going to bed. Alone. Days passed with me wearing a mask, constantly harassed with messages to keep quiet, but that part wasn't much of a task. The more he kept to check the tighten the noose got around my neck, the more I realised what he did was wrong. My crippled personality struggled to belong, with thoughts of it repeating like an overplayed song. To ask for help, I knew I had to be strong. I'm going to tell them. I'm going to tell them because they'll understand. Because they'll believe me when I say it was his command and that he emotionlessly forced my hand. But what if they make me take a stand? I'm going to tell them. Because they'll know what to do. They always do. Because they'll stop it before it escalates to something more taboo. Because they will help me to start anew, and because then they'll understand why the last time they went in for a hug I involuntarily withdrew. Because they'll believe what I'm telling them is true. Because Mum will comfort me with her winter stew whilst Dad does his best to undo this warped view that all men will act this way too. I'm going to. Mum? Dad? I love you.
Yeah, that was gorgeous.
Thank you.
That was beautiful, I think. As I say, it has language in it which is so descriptive, which I think is needed in terms of it doesn't shy away from detail, which for people who've gone through it or people who are wanting to understand that experience is really important.
Yeah.
I mean, you wrote it for your parents in terms of the frustrations about bridging the gap which he wedged between you and within your relationship. I mean, do you feel like the poem helped you to get closer to them?
Yeah, I mean, I must admit, there was one moment where my dad first heard this poem, and that was the one moment where I thought, do I not do this? Because of how heartbroken he was to hear it. And I held him as he cried, and it was at the time, probably after everything I'd been through, the worst moment of my life was my dad crying over it, Like, I can go through it 10 times over if he didn't feel the pain from it, because I just love them so much. So this poem was the one when he heard it, it broke him. But we have all come so far together, and he knows my poetry. He actually has a book of my poetry written out where they get the poems in that book, my parents do, before I put them anywhere else. I write it in there and they have it, because I've always felt like we go through this together, we went through this journey together, and because they've lived it as well, and I can't imagine what it's like to have a child go through this. I don't know that position, I just know the going through it position, and I do understand that theirs is a painful position to be in as well. So it was the moment when I thought maybe this isn't the right thing to do, but then his pride in me doing it counteracts all of that thought, because he's so proud of how I'm doing and how I speak out about it, and we can't change that it happened. That me not writing the poetry won't mean that this didn't happen. So me writing it means that other people hopefully have different experiences, don't have bad experiences, can talk about their bad experiences. Whatever difference it makes, at least it makes some sort of a difference. And I think for me and my family, it is therapeutic, hopefully for them as well, for me to be able to kind of speak about it like that and get it out for all of us, and not just hold it in for all of us. I can't remember the initial question. I feel like I digressed.
I think you answered it perfectly. It was just that, did it help you to bridge that gap that was wedged between you, sort of writing it and hearing it? And
I think ultimately the poetry as a whole has brought us closer together, regardless of what has happened. So like, rather than that being a barrier between us because I'm not speaking about it, I've now spoken about it, included them in me speaking about it, and we have a very open, very close relationship, to the point where I know I can go to them about anything and with anything. So yeah, it's definitely helped in that way. I think the main message as well that I would want people to take away from that piece would be how difficult it is to tell people that that has happened to you, because of the blame and the shame and the guilt that you feel. It's not yours to hold, that is all the abusers, but it doesn't stop you from thinking that that is yours in that moment. So as much as a lot of the poetry I wrote was for the people immediately around me as well, I think on a wider scale, if someone else is listening to it, I'd hope that the message is, it's so hard to say it, it's so hard to speak out about it, so let's try and make it easier for people to talk about this stuff. Let's be more open about this stuff, so that if it happens to somebody, they don't feel like they have to stop themselves, that they can actually go for it and say, this happened.
You can see your hesitation, can see why it's so difficult. I mean, the burden of thinking that this is your fault, of that guilt, is just crippling. But this is a wonderful note to end on, because this is what I'd love people to take away from this, is that no matter what you go through, no matter how hard things are, whether it's a relationship of abuse or if it's anything in life, there's always people around you that you can rely on, and don't shut them off. Try and keep them, close, and communicate, because if you don't say anything, they don't know.
Yeah, exactly. And it's okay. Like, someone will understand, someone will believe you, and it's okay to speak out about it. It's not gonna come back on you in a negative way.
No.
But pick someone you trust, and then speak to them about it, and take it from there. And if anybody is looking for any crisis resources and for somewhere to reach out to, I have a website which is www.jemimahughespoet.co.uk, and there is a support page on there with a list of crisis resources for both mental health and for sexual violence trauma and abuse trauma. And there's also a blog page where other people have shared their previous experiences, or maybe even current experiences, of mental health issues and different situations that they've been through. And there's also loads of videos on there of different poems and videos, and how we can help each other, and what helps if we're struggling with sleep deprivation, anxiety, depression, panic disorder, all of that.
Thank you so much. And thank you for your generosity and sharing, everything with us. It's been so fantastic to talk to you and connect with you, and to understand your experiences just that little bit more.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me, and thank you for providing this platform to everybody else that you have on here as well, and to women to be able to share all of our experiences, because it's so important.
Thank you. That's really kind of you. And we'll be following your journey as well in your next book. As well. What's it called?
It's no one knows this. Yeah, okay. It's a secret so far.
It's in your notes app somewhere that you haven't used.
Exactly. It's my unused note. All I can say is it follows on from this, so it complements this one.
I can't wait to see it.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.